The Department of Justice arrested and charged a 29-year-old Russian national for working as an unregistered foreign agent Monday. Federal officials, not the special counsel, handed down the indictment against Maria Butina as President Trump met with Russia's Vladimir Putin in Helsinki, Finland. The charges allege Butina tried to advance Russian interests through her relationship with the National Rifle Association. Last fall, CBS News learned Butina worked closely with Alexander Torshin, a Russian also tied to the NRA. Butina's lawyer responded to the allegations. He wrote in part, quote, "Maria Butina is not an agent of the Russian Federation," saying she was simply a student working to promote a better relationship between the U.S. and Russia. Tim Dickinson joins me now from Portland, Oregon. He's a contributor for Rolling Stone. Tim, thanks so much for being with us. Let's start with the charges against Butina. What exactly is she accused of doing?
She's accused of being an unregistered foreign agent, essentially a spy of some sort, engaged in Russian statecraft inside the United States surreptitiously. So it's a conspiracy to do that with Torshin and some unnamed unindicted, I should say, American co-conspirators.
And Tim, Butina's lawyer argues that her work was conducted out in the open, not covertly. Is that the crux of their defense?
It's curious because she also, on her LinkedIn page, describes herself as a special assistant to Torshin. So she's on the Russian government payroll at the time that she's a student here in the United States. And she was the head of this sort of Potemkin NGO that was promoting gun rights in Russia that had a special relationship with the NRA. And that has since been liquidated. So this was sort of a faux gun rights group that was very convincing to the people in the NRA that had established sort of long and deep ties to the NRA. And Maria came and went on a student visa.
Right now, you know, as you just mentioned, she was accused of working with a Russian official suspected to be Alexander Torshin. Who is he exactly?
He was Mitch McConnell in the Russian Senate. He was briefly acting head of the Russian Senate. So he was there when the Russian Senate was, legalizing the invasion and annexation of Crimea. And he's now a deputy banker in the Russian Central Bank who also has some reported ties to organized crime throughout Europe. So he's an important and not altogether savory figure.
We also have Greg Gordon in Washington. He's an investigative reporter for McClatchy. Greg, welcome. The DOJ claims that at least 2 Americans engaged with Butina. What more do we know about who they may be and their alleged roles?
Well, there's wide speculation that so-called person number 1 is Paul Erickson, who is a operative, Republican operative, and sometimes NRA fundraiser. Person number 2 is more of a mystery, but I'm not going to speculate about that because I don't want to impugn anybody's or hurt anybody's reputation unfairly. But there's been a lot. Let's just say that there have been a number of former NRA officials who have gotten involved with the Russians over the last 7 years, formed friendships, etc. And Alexander Torshin, who I suspect you were just talking about, was at the crest of that. He was in the lead in setting up a relationship with the NRA and becoming a lifetime member of that organization.
So I'm going to get right back. I'm going to get back to you, Greg, in a minute about the sort of NRA, Trump, Russia connections, if there are any. But Tim, I want to talk about a report that you published back in April titled "Inside the Decade-Long Russian Campaign to Infiltrate the NRA and Help Elect Trump." So tell us about this. Why is Russia interested in the National Rifle Association?
Well, Russia is interested in having influence in American politics. And if you can get in with the NRA, you're sort of in with the Republican Party, as we've seen, and as the FBI affidavit talks very clearly about, sort of has revealing documents having Butina and Torshin talking about the value of using the NRA as a lever, essentially. That if you can flip around the NRA's position on Russia, you could probably flip around the general Republican Party's animosity towards Russia.
So you also reported on Torshin's ties to U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton. What can you tell us about that?
Well, Bolton is kind of this. He had to cut a video for Butina's group, Right to Bear Arms in Russia, feting them and their efforts to expand gun rights in Russia. And the fact that a guy like Bolton got looped into this group, I think just speaks to the tentacles that the Russians were able to extend throughout the Republican and national security apparatus on the conservative side. And in fact, that's what the FBI affidavit describes as the end goal, the objective of the conspiracy that Butina and Torshin and the unindicted American co-conspirators are alleged to have been part of.
And so, Greg, you wrote about how the NRA spent $30 million to upstart President Trump's campaign. But now that Butina's been charged, some are wondering whether this could be the bridge to a possible collusion case. These were not charges brought by the special counsel. So does that suggest she's not factoring into Mueller's investigation?
Well, look, I was first assigned to the Justice Department, I'm embarrassed to say, regarding my age, in 1978. I think there's zero chance that the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia is not in regular touch on this case with the Mueller team. This may have more to do with the approaching election and Mueller's need to speed things up because he doesn't want to be taking any actions very close to the election. Now, with regard to the money, the $30 million, which was nearly triple what the NRA spent on the Romney campaign in 2012 against Obama, of that money, I believe all but $7 million was spent by an arm of the NRA that does not have to publicly reveal its donors. So we wrote a story in late June indicating that it's highly likely that the prosecutors and FBI agents involved in tracing the money were afforded access by the IRS with the judge's or magistrate's approval to the NRA's tax filings with the IRS, which show the identities of all these donors, these dark money donors, as they're known. So that doesn't necessarily mean they found anything, and I'm not implying that they did, but that would be an obvious investigative step, and it probably happened quite a while ago. Because the NRA has consistently said we haven't been contacted by the FBI, and this might be why.
So,
and I could also just point out that the way in which this arrest was made, Butina's lawyer, who says she's just a straight A student in international studies at American University, and he had no notice of any of this, and why didn't the Justice Department contact her? Well, all the other Russians are in Russia who've been indicted, and she's here. And I suspect that they wanted to catch her off guard and before she, rather than tipping her off.
Right, so that makes sense. So both of you mentioned that investigators want to show whether Russian banker Alexander Torshin illegally channeled money through the NRA and back around to Trump's campaign that way. Does Butina's indictment indicate anything about that, or is it completely separate?
I don't think that we know the answer to that question. Alexander Torshin allegedly, according to the Spanish authorities, helped launder money for the mob to Spanish banks and hotels. So one would think there'd be almost a dereliction if the FBI didn't look to see, once they saw his role with the NRA and Butina's role, if the FBI didn't try to determine whether he had funneled money. That's how this whole investigation started. Was they were looking to see if Russia tried to channel funds, illicitly to assist Trump in his presidential campaign. And
Tim, what's your take on this? Does this spell trouble, the sort of Butina, Torshin, NRA, Russia, Trump campaign nexus?
Oh, I think so, absolutely. It seems to be sort of one of the leading tips of the spear as to if there's collusion. It was probably among this group of individuals. And to your other question, the FBI affidavit speaks, and it's a little vague as to who the source of the funding was, but Butina was seeking $125,000 for her efforts to essentially tour all of the Republican events in early 2016. The affidavit is sort of frustratingly unclear as to whether she was soliciting it from an American or getting the Americans' approval or editing advice on this document that she was going to submit to Russian. But so there's money flowing around here, and Erickson, who we mentioned before, the American who's suspected to be person number one in the affidavit, he and Butina set up a secret LLC in South Dakota that nobody knows what it did. So it's a real open question as to what the nature of that business was, and was it being used to move money around, which Erickson said he was using it in case Butina had some extraneous education expenses, which seems like a very strange justification for it.
There's a lot here that still has yet to come to light. Greg Gordon and Tim Dickinson, thanks to both of you.
Thank you. Great to be here.